Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing a gentleman who personifies the qualities that truly demonstrate a profile in courage. The son of a Cuban immigrant father, Jim Acosta is a CNN chief White House correspondent, currently covering the Trump administration and previously covered the Obama administration from the White House and around the world. He regularly covers presidential press conferences, visits by heads of states, and issues impacting the executive branch of the federal government. In addition, Acosta reported from the 2016 campaign trail following then Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. But it is for his determination and dogged pursuit of the truth that we honor Mr. Acosta this evening. Last November, following a heated exchange with the president, the Trump administration revoked his White House press pass and falsely accused him of laying his hands on a female White House aide. All of this because Mr. Acosta rebuked the president for referring to a caravan of Central American immigrants as an invasion, and asked the president if he thought he was demonizing immigrants. Needless to say, his press pass was restored, and he continues to fight for the freedom of the press and refuses to be intimidated for simply doing his job. Be on the lookout this summer for his book about his first 2 years covering the Trump White House, titled "The Enemy of the People: A Dangerous Time to Tell the Truth in America." Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor, un gran honor, to introduce the 2019 LULAC Profile and Courage honoree, Mr. Jim Acosta.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you so much for this award tonight. It's an honor to be with you here in Washington and address this wonderful organization. My hat off to Domingo Garcia and everybody here at LULAC. I really appreciate it. Now, you just heard a few moments ago, you may have been wondering about my roots. My dad, as was just mentioned a few moments ago, is a Cuban immigrant. He came to this country in September 1962, 3 weeks before the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he moved to the D.C. area. That's right, I'm a native, one of the rare natives. Moved to this area with my grandmother. He was only 11 years old at the time. I like to call him one of the original dreamers. He had never experienced winter in D.C. before. He had never seen snow. He was from Cuba. It was his first time being cold. But he remembers the story about how a Presbyterian church in Virginia gave my dad and grandmother some coats and sweaters so they could stay warm during their first winter in D.C. He's talked to me about the teacher in his elementary school who patiently pulled him aside and taught him how to read and write English. Today, my dad sounds more Virginian than Cuban. And those stories about my dad have always stayed with me because they're about a spirit of generosity from his new home here in America. Unfortunately, newcomers to this country aren't finding that same spirit today. We see Mexican immigrants described by the president as criminals. We see children being ripped away from their parents at the border. You all know all this. And we see migrants, as was just mentioned a few moments ago, being described as invaders. I can't imagine my dad and grandmother being called criminals as they arrived in America. My family was shown love and kindness when they came to this country. And as you may have seen, I've had some tense interactions with folks at the White House over this important issue of immigration. I feel like on a daily basis, I bring my story as the son of a Cuban refugee to the White House and the press conferences that they sometimes hold. They don't hold as many as they used to. Now, you may remember the time when White House official Stephen Miller told me the Statue of Liberty no longer stands as a reminder that America is a nation of immigrants. Anybody remember that one? Sure you do. Then there was the time at the White House Easter egg roll when I tried to get an answer on what would happen to the hundreds of thousands, even millions, we're told, of dreamers living in this country, the dreamers who are joining us here tonight, and we salute you as well. Thank you for what you do. But at that time, as President Trump has said, there was little hope for saving the DACA program. This was around Easter of last year. So it was the day after Easter, and the press was escorted out onto the south lawn of the White House to cover the Easter egg roll festivities. You've seen this on TV before. Now, this is kind of a funny story. The young aides who work for Trump, known as the press wranglers, took a special interest in me on that day. I can't imagine why. And there was one wrangler in particular who kept moving me around the venue. First she said, Acosta, stand over here. Then she said, no, you're supposed to be over there. And then another wrangler came over and said, Acosta, you're not supposed to be in that spot. Move over to this area over here. I was getting more attention than the Easter Bunny. And so I did what I was told, and then lo and behold, the President of the United States walks right up and sits down with a group of children directly in front of where I was standing. I should have thanked those wranglers for putting me in the perfect spot. So I asked the President whether the DACA kids should be worried. He blamed the Democrats and took no responsibility. And so then I asked her, well, didn't you kill DACA? And then there was silence. He didn't answer that question. You might remember that from that day. But later on that same day, the Trump campaign 2020 campaign manager, Brad Parscale, went on Twitter and called for my press credentials to be revoked. A few days after that, I received a death threat that I could not repeat in front of this audience. It was just that bad. Later on in the fall, it gets worse. After the midterm elections, I again challenged the president, I was just mentioned a few moments ago, on some of his false statements about immigration. As you may recall, the president didn't like my questions very much about his false claim that a caravan of migrants making its way from Central America to the U.S. border amounted to an invasion. As we all know, there was no invasion. California is still a part of the United States. Thank goodness it didn't become the colony of New Guatemala. Now, the White House didn't care for how that whole thing went down, and so later that night, I got a notification on my phone. I got a tweet from Sarah Sanders stating that my press pass had been revoked. The press secretary, as you may recall, a lot of people saw this, told a lie when she said I had placed my hands on an intern who came for my microphone. You can see in the video, I did no such thing. But that didn't stop them. As you may also remember, Sarah Sanders tried to bolster her case by tweeting out a doctored version of the video, a video that came from the fringe website InfoWars, which is known for spreading wild conspiracy theories and lies. The video had been sped up and altered to create the false impression that I had karate chopped the intern. You guys remember that one, the karate chop? Now, first of all, I don't know karate. I'm just a humble son of a Cuban immigrant from Fairfax County, Virginia. Pork chops, I know. I know pork chop. Karate chops, not so much. Dad joke there, sorry. But fortunately, people could plainly see that the only thing under assault that day was the truth. Yet the White House was asking the public to see its version of reality, an alternative reality, kind of like alternative facts. We took the administration to court and won, and a Trump-appointed judge ruled in our favor. Thank you very much. I felt that way too at the time. A Trump-appointed judge ruled in our favor and ordered the White House to return my press pass. The judge referred to that video of being of questionable accuracy. Just like to throw that out there as well. But there's another thread I've come to discuss, and it's not just on our sense of reality and objective truths. Trump is attacking the free press in America with the kind of language we have never heard from a U.S. president before. He calls us fake news, and worse, the enemy of the people. We at CNN and the White House press corps have tried to warn the president and his team that this kind of language can be dangerous. As you have probably seen, there are a number of YouTube videos out there, you probably have seen this, of people directing the worst kinds of insults at me and my colleagues in the press corps. Just this week, This was in the news. A photographer of the BBC was attacked by a Trump supporter at the president's rally in El Paso. Now, I have covered 4 presidential elections, and this is my second administration covering the White House. This has not happened before. As I have stated to a number of folks when asked about the Trump rallies, it doesn't feel like I'm in America anymore. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but in my view, you don't treat your fellow Americans like that. You don't treat your fellow human beings like that. This verbal abuse, this threatening rhetoric, this climate of fear for the press in America continues to this day. And what is the effect around the world? Now there are other leaders in other countries across the globe referring to stories they don't like as fake news. Autocratic governments suddenly feel emboldened to crack down on journalists, sometimes in violent ways. Just today, a journalist in the Philippines, a friend of mine named Maria Ressa, was arrested after her tough reporting on that government there. And last fall, as we all know, this was in the news constantly, Jamal Khashoggi, a journalist from Saudi Arabia, was murdered in Turkey in retaliation for his reporting on the kingdom. And then there was the frightening case of Cesar Seoc, the Trump supporter who sent pipe bombs to CNN and various Democratic officials just before the midterms last fall. When they arrested the suspect, I'm sure you saw this, his white van was covered with anti-media signage. In our archive footage, we discovered he had been to a number of the president's rallies. As the president of CNN said in a statement about the attempted bombing of our headquarters in New York, the president's words matter. All of this adds up to one painful reality. This is a dangerous time to tell the truth in America. But make no mistake, the journalists at CNN, my colleagues in the press, are not going to be bullied, and we are not going to be terrorized. Imagine the alternative. Imagine what life would be like if the only trusted news source were the government, mandating what's reported and controlling what is deemed to be the truth. I have visited places like that. My father comes from a place like that. They are not the United States of America. What would the government tell us to believe if they were in control of the news? That Barack Obama wasn't born in the United States? That Donald Trump did have the biggest inauguration crowd size in the history of the world? Would they tell us we're under invasion? That's the message I want to pass on to you tonight. The fight for the truth is on. There is something we can all do. As journalists and as citizens, we must take a stand. Not necessarily against the president, but a stand for the truth. Our founding fathers talked about something called self-evident truths. They are the truths that are evident to all of us. You can use your own eyes, your own ears, your own minds to determine for yourselves what the truth is, what is right and wrong, what is real, what is fake. Let us figure out for ourselves just who exactly are the real enemies of the people. When it comes to that critical question, I believe the truth is worth the fight. Thank you very much.